this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? I'm Bud Elliott. This is the Cover 3 College Football Podcast, and it's summer school time. Hey, Florida State Day, Knowles 247. Look at that. Brendan Sonnone, welcome back, buddy.
Hello, nice to be doing this again. Hopefully I don't look as silly as I did last year.
Hey, man, it happens as college football, the transfer portal era does, it giveth and it taketh, and last year it certainly taketh from Florida State 13-0, 13-1 to 2-10. What's the general vibe inside this program?
Yeah, I do think internally there is a good deal of optimism. Now, I don't think they love the roster, and as we're recording this, this just ended the main push of the spring transfer window, and you saw them be fairly aggressive. I don't know how many ads that they got that you love, but they showed you through their actions. Oh, they needed a starting cornerback, and they went out and got one. And they needed someone to contend for a starting running back job. They went out and got one. They tried to get a starting wide receiver to go with their other two. I don't know if they went out and got one, but basically, point being is that they felt that they still had needs to fill going into this portion of the offseason. Whether they addressed it or not is another question. However, I do think genuinely Mike Norvell does like the makeup of the team in terms of his words this offseason have been desperation and grit and edge. And I do think he likes that this team is a little bit more mature, certainly more mature than last year's team. A little bit more dialed in with experience. And I think that shows up more on the day-to-day stuff. Not to say the work ethic was bad last year, but some of the response stuff, I think there's less having to convince yourself of it this spring. At least that's certainly how it sounds from talking to different sources and whatnot. What that means from a win-loss record, I'm not sure. But yeah, generally, I think that there's some level of optimism that they're moving in the right direction. That being said, Bud, be hard to be going in the opposite direction because there's not a whole lot more margin for error than 2 wins.
2 wins is a toughie. So offensive, total overhaul on the offense. Mike Norvell brings in Gus Malzahn, who I think I don't know. I don't want to get into did he still want to be a head coach? Did everybody around him still want to be a head coach? Maybe this is a happy medium if he doesn't have to recruit in Tallahassee and just does the play calling. He's had some successful offenses. They bring in Thomas Castellanos. What do you think this is going to look like?
I think from a fit perspective, Tommy Castellanos does make a lot of sense with what Gus Malzahn wants to do and what some of his best offenses have been. And when you talk to Gus Malzahn about what an ideal quarterback is, I think there's some pushback that it has to be a running quarterback, but you look at what his best offenses have been, generally, you've had someone who's had to be a pretty dynamic runner. And Tommy Castellanos has shown that in his career. Weird disconnect to me is that, last year at Boston College, some of the running efficiency stuff wasn't anywhere as good as it was the year before. There was a head coaching change, a drastic scheme change, I think more of an emphasis on him passing the ball. So you can find that happy medium if you can get him to where, okay, he's more efficient passing the football like he was last season, at least with some of the short and intermediate stuff, and then blend it with some of the dynamic athleticism where he rushed for over 1,000 yards in 2023. Then you might have something that fits pretty well there. I do think this is going to be a quintessential Gus Malzahn offense. We have all the jet motion, and you have a lot of speed at wide receiver. I think it's going to look a lot like what some of Gus's marquee offenses have looked like in the past. Now, whether they're as efficient as some of the best ones, and he has had some great ones over the years, but that's also going back 10 years or so too. I'm curious to see just how efficient it is. We know that Gus Malzahn offenses are going to be able to run the ball effectively. They've loaded up with beef on the offensive line. Run game, we'll see if they have a dynamic running back on the roster. It's going to be a huge part of it. But as far as having a point person, I think Tommy Castellanos is a really good fit, dude. I do think that. I don't know what the ceiling is there, but I think he certainly elevates the floor as someone who can run the ball effectively. Remember, this is also a guy who Gus Malzahn recruited as a quarterback out of high school. Florida State recruited Tommy Castellanos as an athlete. A lot of other schools did too. Gus Malzahn saw something there. They had a decent year together in 2021, I want to say it was, at UCF. And then Tommy left to go be a starting quarterback at Boston College after UCF brought in John Race Plumlee. And now they reunite again here in 2025.
I think I'm willing to lie to myself about Castellanos a little bit just because, it's Boston College. Bill O'Brien comes in. He's a guy that told Jalen Milroe to go play tight end, right? or receiver, whatever it was, but like didn't believe in like running quarterbacks. So it kind of makes sense. Like a new head coach would eventually want to put his stamp on his program and actually get his system installed. And Castellanos is not a good thrower, really by any stretch. So like if you want to put in Grayson James, who's a much better thrower than Castellanos is, I kind of get it. Like we can quibble with how he handled it on both sides, probably, but as long as Castellanos knows he's there to run, and like there's no like NFL future as a quarterback or like none of that kind of nonsense, I could see that working. It on the throwing side though. How much of how many of these passes are going to go to Deuce Robinson?
I think a lot, as they probably should. So you look at who they've brought in, and Castellanos has talked about, and yeah, some of this I hedged a little bit, but he's talked about like he's never had weapons like this before, and yeah, I tend to believe that. Like Deuce Robinson, by all accounts, in the first half of spring, ended up having a minor ankle injury that kept him out for about a week and a half or so, which in spring camp is a good chunk of it, and returned late in it. But he was awesome in the first half, and that's kind of what we hoped you were getting with him. He's a former blue chip, 5-star recruit out of high school. He'd been solid at USC, not excellent, but I think solid at 300 plus yards both of his first 2 seasons. FSU likes him. And, kind of look at it, Bud, and I try to think about where FSU sits in kind of this precarious like position of like not really knowing a lot of what they have on offense, a lot of new pieces, kind of a prove it or lose it type of year from just a perception standpoint. Kind of reminds me back in 2022, what they had going into the year. Less known commodity at quarterback. Remember Jordan Travis ended 2021 at a really high level. Had already been in Mike Norvell's offense for a couple of years. But look at like the skill positions that they brought in now versus what they brought in back in 2022, and it worked out awesome for FSU then, right? Like you hit a home run with Johnny Wilson, that was a gamble. You hit a home run with Trey Benson, that was a major gamble given the knee injury he had. Micah Pittman was a solid single there, and you look at what you've brought in this cycle, especially at wide receiver. Like I think Deuce Robinson, who gets compared to Johnny Wilson a lot, I mean, he's shown a lot more in his career than Johnny Wilson has. I think that's a better, higher floor and higher ceiling player. Squirrel White, if healthy, I think is a more dynamic player than Micah Pittman. So, like, I feel pretty good, man, about your first 2 wide receivers. I do. Like, when Squirrel White's healthy, that is a really good player. Now, the caveat is, like, is he healthy? How healthy is he? And then I think you get to, like, look at the rest of the wide receiver room. Jaylen Brown is someone, whether you like it or not, like, they were going to play as your probably 3rd to 4th wide receiver. He ended up getting dismissed from the team for an off-field incident. He's now at Arkansas. I don't know if you replaced him adequately with Gavin Blackwell. I'm curious to see that with the UNC transfer, who hadn't played very much and lost playing time over the years there. So there's like the depth concern I have is legitimate, man. It is. But in terms of like having a true number 1, I think Deuce Robinson can be that guy. Big, physical, actually pretty decent athlete. And I think getting him to play like he is a big 6'6" wide receiver is starting to flash a little bit more, but from what we heard in camp. And he's got a maturity level to him too that I think will really help out as well.
And I think it's logical that like Deuce was just kind of blocked by Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, who are probably both going to go like to the NFL. Like it's possible that like he wants to go somewhere and be like the guy, whereas it wasn't going to happen at USC. The Squirrel White thing is interesting to me, at least, because like Tennessee desperately needs receiver help, and they should be in the best position to know like what's his injury situation, like their ability to assess the bounce back there. But I mean, hey, like people get stuff wrong all the time, right? So maybe they are wrong. Maybe he will bounce back and regain that prior form. Offensive line last year was just hot garbage. Any chance it's better this year? They brought in 4 transfers.
It can't be much worse. And like how disappointing that was. I mean, they had a group of guys who had pretty much played together for 2.5, 3 seasons. And had played some pretty good football. Like the drop off of Darius Washington is one of the more like perplexing, things from last season. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but like he was legitimately an all ACC first team player, like a real one in 2023, and had been awesome at the start of camp, and it just kind of fell off. He battled an injury. But yeah, like that to me is a microcosm of what the whole offensive line was, where you had a lot of guys who you were just banking on being, at least steady. And it went the opposite direction, quickly. So you overhaul the entire offensive line, which it makes sense. You kind of had to do it, kind of reflective of the lack of recruiting at a high level out of the prep ranks as well. The fact that you have to go in the transfer portal and you end up adding Gunnar Hansen's the veteran from Vanderbilt, I think 3-year starter over there. So not great, but experienced. Okay. Adrian Medley from UCF has multiple years in Gus Malzahn and Herb Hand's system. He apparently was really good in spring camp. Then you have Richie Leonard returns. He'll be your other starting guard. I think most likely Micah Pettis, big dude from Ole Miss, like 6'7", 330, at least maybe even 350. There's a funny picture of Mike Norvell walking with Micah Pettis during his official visit back in December. Mike, who's like maybe 5'9", 5'10", looking up at Micah Pettis. And like this is very adorable, actually. Micah Pettis, huge, and had a really nice 2024 campaign for Ole Miss. Kind of finally put it together, but he's pretty experienced as well. And the dude that they're really, really excited about is Luke Pettibon, multi-year starter from Wake Forest, all ACC caliber type of guy, has had some injury history as well himself, needs to stay healthy there, a little undersized, but is super, he reminds me of personality-wise of Brian Stork. If you just diluted the gnarliness just by 10% a little bit. He's just kind of in that type of bearded veteran center type of deal, just gruff, but not quite as gruff as Brian Stork. But yeah, it's an experienced group. You needed to gel. They didn't really get that time, Bud, in the spring. There was a lot of injuries. Micah Pettison practiced a lot. Gunnar Hansen did have, and I always want to call it Gunnar Holcomb too, so I just have to check my notes. It's not Gunnar Holcomb. Gunnar Hansen did have a shoulder injury that he had to kind of rehab from. So you were dinged up, but yeah, it's a veteran group. I get worried about the depth. I do. I know they like Andre Otto. I do too. But he was overwhelmed when he had to play as a redshirt freshman last season. Jake Rizzi had some bright moments late in the year. He's coming off a knee injury now. So yeah, there are some concerns where if you do have an injury to an older group that has a lot of wear and tear on it, I think it falls off a cliff fairly quickly. We'll see if they had to get into their depth some. It is offensive line, I imagine. So they didn't go out and get a veteran offensive lineman in the transfer portal. So they opted for some younger guys to kind of replenish the room and build for the future. So we'll see.
I think that's the case. Man, I've done 20-ish of these so far. We're starting the second week of summer school recordings. I don't think any team coming off like a 2-10 type season feels good about their O-line depth, at all. Everybody is screwed if you lose more than a couple guys.
We had in the Knowles 24/7 group chat, we were talking about needs before, and I forget one of the guys, I think maybe one of the younger guys was a swing tackle would be great. I'm like, yeah, we keep an eye out for it. But if you have a swing tackle, if there's an available swing tackle, then he's probably a starter somewhere else. That's just kind of, everyone needs a tackle. So yeah, that's a fair point.
Exactly. All right. So got a lot of people who play college fantasy listening to this. Who we drafted at running back and what kind of share of the carries are we expecting?
And I have that is one of the biggest enigmas of the offense, really, because Gus Malzahn's going to run the football. We know that. And traditionally, he is totally fine going to I think RJ Harvey had almost 500 carries over 2 years at UCF. He is fine giving the ball to someone over and over again. And, a little bit earlier on, I can't remember the guy's name, but they had the Northwestern transfer, Bowser, maybe? Bruiser, okay. Bowser. It was something like that. It was he ran the way the name was.
Isaiah Bowser? Yeah.
That's it. And they did a little bit more blending of situational stuff. So it doesn't always have to be just a true, surefire bell cow. But generally, Gus Malzahn's going to run the football a lot, and he's going to run it a lot with a singular person. I don't know who RB1 is going into the season. Now, I think ideally, if you're Florida State and the way you constructed your salary and what you're rolling the dice on financially, and just probably just from a roster makeup standpoint, is Usman Kroma, blue chip, borderline 5-star running back. I think we at 24/7 Sports had him as top 4 or 5 running back nationally. You flipped him from Georgia late in the process. I think you're kind of banking on him eventually being the guy. Super unique running style, well built. There's a chance that if it works, like that, yeah, that's a guy who has NFL upside. But how does that running style how does he adapt to it in the college game quickly? How does he do with the wear and tear of the college game? He was used as a sub wide receiver a lot last season as well, and was effective with that. But it's a question to me, man. It is, and if that works with him, it could work out splendidly. But you're banking on that. Now, if it's not him, Roydell Williams is a guy they liked a lot in the spring. They liked him going into last season as well. And I thought, the first couple of games of the season, Roydell kind of caught some flack for not being super dynamic. I thought he was breaking tackles and stuff when he didn't always have a ton of space. The issue is when he got out into space, he wasn't dynamic. And you kind of have to be, right? If they get you out in a one-on-one on the perimeter, you got to make someone miss. And that wasn't the case. He ends up having an injury from friendly fire in practice and misses a bunch of the season. And comes back. But yeah, he averages 2 yards per carry. And so even if he's better, and I know he was efficient at Alabama. I like some of his Alabama tape, and I thought with some of the inside zone stuff he did was actually really good. He might be a good fit, but that's another gamble is what I'm trying to say. And then Gavin Sawchuk, they just got from Oklahoma. In 2023, he was good, man, and he was really good at inside zone running, which is what Herb Hand does. I think he was top 10 nationally in power forward running backs in yards per carry on inside zones. And you see his running style, it fits. It makes sense, but kind of in the squirrel white mold, that's another guy who was really dinged up last year and his efficiency, went down. And I don't know how hard Oklahoma, fought to keep him. So yeah, I know I just threw out a bunch of names. Jalen Lucas, I think, is a nice change of pace, kind of gadgety guy. Cam Davis, haven't heard much about him. I don't think he's a great fit for what they want to do, and that would be disappointing because that was a top 10 running back nationally for you. So yeah, threw out a bunch of names. That's typically not how it works in the Gus Malzahn scheme. And part of that is, I don't know. I don't know if they know. I know what they think will happen. I think it's Usman Chroma eventually, but yeah, shrug my shoulders. And I've learned a lot in the last year, Bud, to say, we'll see.
Absolutely. All right, let's hit a break. On the flip side, we'll come back, talk a little Noles defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Hey guys, welcome back into the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. I'm Bud Elliott. It's our summer school series. That's Brendan Sonnone. That means we are talking Florida State today. Noles 247 on the Bench podcast does a great job for us. All right, Brendan, new defensive coordinator Tony White comes over from Nebraska, boatload of transfers. If this works, how does it work, and who is making this thing go?
I think if it works well, and I mean, I got to say, this was the one, not the one, but of when the media policy changed in the spring, and I was disappointed to not see it in person. This is I really wanted to see Tony White's scheme and how it was implemented with the pieces they had. I thought that was going to be super cool because they were going to be doing, and they did, a bunch of mixing and matching with players all over the place. I thought that was going to be a really fun, I thought it was just be a fun discovery period to see how the coaching staff goes about using this very multiple hybrid 3 safety scheme. And it's different about this 3 safety scheme than a lot of the other 5 DB packages that are out there that college football programs run. I don't want to say exclusively, but primarily is they often have 3 safeties lined up pretty high up on the field. Now they're going to mix that around a lot, and they really want to become a malleable group with the secondary where they have the safeties eventually line up and the body types and stuff. But just across the ball, I was very interested to see, or across the entire field on defense, I was just really interested to see how they mixed and matched defensive line pieces and who was playing on the edge, who was going to be playing inside. I think we just want this to be this super malleable, mixable scheme, which sounds great in theory. But are you going to be able to establish consistency and continuity at your base positions before you can expand into that in year one of the scheme? You might be able to, and then build off of it. And that's the ideal goal, I think. But if it works, it's going to be because you have a good foundation of your first 11. But then I think your depth is going to be something that's going to be really important. If you end up having good depth, and when I say good depth, I don't mean your number 2 player being comparable to your starter. I mean your number 2 player being a legitimate co-starter in that sense, and someone who's giving you quality, above average snaps. And I know that's not not every team has that. Some do, right? The best of the best defenses do have that, where your backups and sub-package players are starting caliber to the first 4 or 5 off the bench. But because I think you lack generally star power on this defense, I think the depth is going to have to be something that caters to the malleability and the versatility that you want. So it's a long-winded way of me saying, like, I think the depth, and like, if this works out, you're going to need like a legitimate, like 2 deep to get through the season, because of not just injuries, but like being able to win in sub packages and win in the margins. I think that's what I look at as being an interesting part of this defense if it works this year.
We recently did our cover 3 way too early 2026 mock draft, and looking at a composite of some of the other mock drafters out there, one of them had Daryl Jackson in it, and they had asked me, I was like, I don't trust Daryl Jackson to be a first rounder, like, at all. Yeah. But I guess you have to acknowledge the potential is there if he cares and really wants to play hard all the time and put it together.
Yeah.
Is there any signs that he's going to be that guy?
I know the pause isn't great radio, great television.
Well,
great
because
YouTube.
if he was already, he would be gone.
That's where I was kind of at. Like, you're saying signs, like, I know Mike Norvell spoke really highly of Daryl Jackson and his steps he was taking towards being a more vocal leader. James Williams, who comes over from Nebraska and has an idea of what this scheme can look like when it's running at high efficiency, spoke highly of Daryl Jackson as a leader as well. Generally, like, and I know players can improve, and I think Daryl Jackson can improve, just playing with technique and I think the scheme fit might be interesting for him. And like, it's a running joke on our message board because I would always say he was good in practice 2 years ago, which he was good at practice 2 years ago. And people are like, he wasn't good last season. He had 30 quarterback pressures. Like, he wasn't bad by any means. And he was really good at pushing the pocket in certain games and certain matchups. Can he be consistent in the run game? Can he play with leverage? It's just tough at 6'6". I get that. But if he's able to do that and win in kind of this 2-gap scheme, like, the tools are there. Like, he moves really well at his size, and there's some freaky strength that shows up at times. Like, it's about playing pissed off all the time. I don't know. I don't know if that's something that, like, would I be surprised if Daryl Jackson was a first-round pick? No. Do I expect it? Not necessarily at this point. And again, I know guys can improve, but this is year 5 of college football for him. At this point, I know it's been a weird journey, but just, I think if he's if he's just even a slightly more consistent player for you than he was last year, that's a big win. I don't know if that's first round level, but he probably, if he's slightly more consistent than he was last year, just based on the tools and some of the flashes, it's probably like a day 2 guy. So I guess that's kind of what I was parsing in my mind. It's like, I don't think he's going to be a first round guy, but yeah, I guess if it all works and clicks for him, yes, he has the skills and the tools to do so, for sure.
He undoubtedly looks the part. Exactly.
Right.
All right. Is there any chance this defense is as good as last year's defense?
Yeah, I think so. Last year's defense wasn't very good.
Right.
But lost in the the offense was so abysmal last year that, and Adam Fuller lost his job ultimately for how the defense performed. And man, the big thing to me was the defense was just soft last year. And that was the main thing is it was soft. And you look at some like the athletic testing, in-game stuff that they had that we're privy to, like, it wasn't athletic defense. Now, someone like Pat Payton's athleticism dropped off earth. And I don't know if that was just him not caring to care as much. I don't know if he was playing through an injury. I don't know if he added too much weight and it wasn't effective with him. But like, there were a few things that materialized that just weren't as good as the year before, obviously. But like, man, like Marvin Jones Jr., yes, tons of tools and athleticism. And if it hits, it hits. Well, it didn't hit at Florida State and it didn't hit at Georgia. Where'd it go? Oklahoma? Maybe it'll hit at Oklahoma. That's kind of, again, like your body work. What I like about the group and why I think it can be better, but again, lower floor. But I like some of the veterans that they brought in to raise the floor. Never measuring this like, if the mission this year for Florida State is to, avoid just a complete unmitigated, like, burning hot seat in 2026 and for it to be a little bit cooler that year and just to raise the floor. Like, yeah, like I think you may have accomplished that with some of your transfer portal additions. I think of like Deontay McCray from Western Kentucky. Like, I liked him. I liked his film at the G5 level. It was solid, mature guy. He's a floor raiser. Stephon Thompson from Nebraska. He's been in Tony White. He's a Tony White mercenary. Pretty much has gone with him pretty much everywhere since like 2020. Not dynamic, but like solid. You look at his PFF stuff, like mid-70s all the time. Like, he's solid. Jeremiah Wilson, who you brought in from Houston, a cornerback, again, who has Tony White background, but was really good at Houston, like really good at Houston. I think he lacks elite NFL type of tools, but in terms of being like a solid college football player, like, yeah, that's another floor raiser for you. So there's unknowns on the defensive side of the ball, but I think it can be decent because, again, I think you brought in a lot of proven, mature commodities. I think that helps you. I remember talking to someone on staff last year before the season who said, yeah, I really like the defense from a talent perspective. And they said, what do you think? I was like, do you really want to know? And they said, yeah. And I said, I think you guys do have a bunch of talent. I know from just dealing with and seeing how some of the defensive players handled the offseason. I had questions about the maturity, and the coach thought about it for a second. So, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. They thought they could get that fixed. They didn't. I haven't seen the same level of that this offseason. It does seem like a pretty mature group, and I think that means something.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, if your goal is to win a natty or something like you in this year, which unlikely, I would think, you need both. But like just having adults in the room, it can certainly help. So with that, how would you define success for Florida State in 2025?
Man, if you can get into like a top 30-ish level in some of the adjusted metrics and stuff like that, even just like yards per play, like I think that's a really good step forward. I think that gives you something to sell. And this is like they put this defense together without having a whole lot to sell. I don't think they didn't recruit the transfer portal at an elite level. I think they did a solid job with it, but that can give you something to sell. Yeah, so I think like being like a top 30-ish defense would be pretty cool. And then if you can get like some of the homegrown guys, like if you can find a way to get like an Amari Williams going as like a sub package player, or if you can get like Omar Graham or Justin Cryer playing at a level higher than they've played previously in their career. The safeties, like you get like Edwin Joseph or Shaheem Brown, like, Shai's a guy who has NFL aspirations, really took a back seat and stepped back last year. But if you're able to like revitalize him or Earl Little Jr., like if you're able to go and get some of these guys across the board who struggled in the previous scheme or just weren't a factor in it, and you're able to get something productive out of them, like then that gives you something to sell. And I think for you to be like a top 30 defense, you're going to need like a Earl Little Jr. who was awful at nickel last year, moved to safety and was very up and down, but like there was at least something there. Like you're going to need him to be good this year, and you're banking on that. Basically, like a long-winded way of me saying, like, if you can go ahead and give yourself something to sell for the 2026 offseason, that would be huge. You just need it to be solid, steady production. And then that can maybe like allow you to start recruiting at a slightly higher level and see if you can just kind of keep replenishing. And that would be the goal, I think. So that's what I would constitute as like successful homegrown talent, mixed with some of their transfers producing and just being solid, man. That's it. Top 30. Get me that and you're probably fine.
That'll work. I look at the schedule and it feels like there's a real material drop off after the top 4 teams you play. Like I think there's 4 teams, like recruiting wise, you don't really hang with, in Bama, Miami, Florida, and Clemson. And that's not to say those are unwinnable. Obviously, like, I mean, Bama's 11-point favorite as we talk here. Like that's not, it's not a 30-point favorite. But there does seem like there's a lot of opportunity if this team actually hits for upside in the remaining 8 games, and maybe you pull an upset in those other 4. You mentioned like if the goal this year is to avoid that scorching hot seat for 26 for Mike Norvell, what's the number that has him going into 26 not on a scorching hot seat?
7 or 8.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, some of it's just like what I'm kind of running through, man, is like some of it depends on what it looks like, injuries, stuff like that. But like I think so 8's the cutoff for me of like you now have something to sell. And 8 shouldn't be the standard at Florida State. And it shouldn't be the standard at Florida State, I know the fan base likes to take shots at the ACC. It's fun. I do too. But, for all the things that the ACC doesn't do well, that should be an advantage for you too, because you are invested as a top end program in a league that isn't, most of the opponents on your schedule are not invested in the same way you are. And so you look at, like you're mentioning the schedule, like you all the other 8 teams that are winnable games, like you invest markedly more into your program than they do. So you should be winning those. And so I don't want to lose sight of, 2-10 shouldn't then all of a sudden lower the bar of what the standard should be at Florida State. Does that make sense? That I think
Totally,
that's
yeah. The buyout is what has lowered the standard, right?
Yes.
Like 2-10, if you don't have a $60 million buyout, is fireable on the spot.
Absolutely. I agree. 2-10 is a fireable offense at Florida State, and we can't look at it in any other way. It's just that's not. And with your FSU ties, that. You just know what when it's operating at high efficiency, but what it looks like, what it needs to look like as well. Certainly wasn't even close to it this past year. The Mike Norvell dynamic is interesting because you also have seen when it is clicking for him and he hits on some of the portal evals and stuff. What it does look like, and it is a team that's capable and should have been in the playoff last year or 2 years ago, and should have been. But so we're looking at what it needs to be to not say a scorching hot seat, and that buyout is a part of it. I do think you end up hitting a point of diminishing returns, though, where you have to start weighing, okay, we have boosters dropping out left and right. They have a brand new stadium, or not brand new stadium, but a refurbished stadium they spent a ton of money on opening up, week 1 of the Alabama game. And so man, if that stadium, if you get blown out there and then that stadium ends up getting emptier and emptier as the year goes on, you have to start weighing things of what that buyout is. And so if you're trying to say, what can it be like for Mike Norvell to not just not be on the scorching hot seat, but maybe have some modicum of okay, he navigated what was an unmitigated disaster of his own doing and learned lessons and figured out, and now has a chance to replenish a little bit. I think 8 is the number, because that gives you stuff at least. Okay, you probably won the games you needed to win on your schedule. If you're competent in those other 4 games, and it's college football, so there can be an upset there and you can get upset somewhere. But if you can go in that range, it at least shows growth, and at least shows, okay, you righted the ship a little bit. Now you have to cash in. High school recruiting has to be markedly better than it has been. If you start getting to 7 wins, it probably keeps it to where you're not going to get fired, but you go into 2026 with people being anything below 6, though, man. If it's another losing season, I think of what the stadium's going to look like. I think of what the conversations that Michael Alford's going to be having with big time boosters, and I know what the buyout is. I don't know where the money would come from at this point. You spent
Probably
so much.
I
don't even know the finance. I mean, as we record this in May, so things could change. I don't even know what the financing, if that's even on the table at this point. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like, which is all to say you need this to be a really solid season for Florida State. It doesn't have to be a home run team, but 8 wins or so is probably pretty important for Mike Norvell, for the athletic department, for the university. Does that make sense? I know it's rambling, but I think there's a lot to dissect there.
Yeah, no, there's wanting and hoping for sure. So we'll see what they can do. Brendan, really enjoyed this, man. As always, everybody just check out y'all's awesome work on Noles 247 on the Bench Pod. You guys crush.
Thanks, dude.